David Katz, everyone.
Great to be with you, Mark.
David, good to see you, sir. I thought of you this morning because of the fact that Donald Trump changed counsels just this morning. And he had a counsel that was very famous. I was telling her, when I know a lawyer, he must be pretty famous. And his last guy was, the defender of rappers who were involved in various controversial cases. And he was kind of a superstar lawyer. He's now changed counsels, and that's in advance of his booking, which will happen later tonight.
Well, he's also got a well-known Atlanta, Georgia lawyer that he's just hired. He represented a lot of people in high-profile cases, racketeering cases, some street gang members who were in racketeering conspiracies. Obviously, a lot of doubters have thought, wow, is this really a racketeering case in the sense that we think of racketeering? And of course, Fani Willis did charge a bunch of school teachers who certified that people had passed exams to go on to the next year, the social promotion. She charged them as being a bunch of racketeers, school teachers. So certainly the people who think it's controversial to have charged this as a racketeering case and have said that, she really likes the idea of calling all of these people who, the narrative on the right is who are political opponents of hers, very unlike her in their political and philosophical views, to call them racketeers. And she seems to love the irony of calling the king of the racketeering prosecutions, Rudy Giuliani, a racketeer himself.
Are you someone who feels that strained, the racketeering tag, or do you feel it falls into that category?
I think that it was overcharging to call it a racketeering enterprise. I think that she could have charged conspiracies, and that her main reason for not charging conspiracies was because she liked branding them all as racketeers. And if there's ever a group of unsympathetic defendants, not the whole group, but I mean, Trump and Giuliani have to be about the most unsympathetic defendants. And there's, of course, a lot of people who think that they should get their comeuppance. They've been up to so much illegal conduct for so long that it's good that, they got charged in this case. But I guess I take the view that I don't like the fact that there's mandatory minimums in the case. There may not be, contrary, Mark, to her press conference, mandatory minimums in this case, but she sure sent that threat out there, didn't she? And if the chickens were ever come to roost, right, if what goes around comes around, you might ask, well, who gave her that terrible legal advice? Would her lawyers be in trouble for corruptly telling her to tell the world that these were 5-year mandatory counts, that you had to go to prison for 5 years to scare the bejesus out of the people listening to her press conference that Monday night? Who gave her that legal advice? Was that something that was corrupt? Should they be in the dock like Professor Eastman and like Cheeseborough? But, it hasn't come around yet. Maybe in 20 years, someone will say, my goodness, or maybe in 5 years, someone will turn around and say, isn't that ironic that Fani Willis, the queen of racketeering prosecutions, is herself downwind of a racketeering prosecution? And I guess what it comes down to is I'm not only against mandatory minimums, I'm also very concerned about state prosecutions. And we've talked about this for a long time, and probably some of your listeners, viewers may think that I'm a troglodyte, a Neanderthal. I guess those are ding words. But you know what I'm saying? But state prosecutions, Mark, what really stops? Let's assume for a second that while Vice President Biden was in Texas, he made one of those phone calls to his son where he put one of his son Hunter's prospects on the line. Okay. What stops for that phone call? Some prosecutor in Texas. Hunter Biden apparently lived in Southern California. We've had some outrageous prosecutions. I had one myself from the Orange County District Attorney's Office. I have nothing but low esteem for them for having brought that prosecution. It was against a bunch of lawyers down there. And I think they've only convicted 2 or 3 of them in 5 years, but they sure charged them. They sure ruined their lives. What stops that Orange County District Attorney's Office in our blue state, but a pretty red place? What stops them from prosecuting Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? What stops them from suddenly having Joe Biden facing 4 criminal prosecutions, or at least one in Orange County and another one in Texas? And so I'm very wary about the timing of all of this. These cases, we talked about this. Merrick Garland took over 2 years, Mark.
Yeah, you feel these cases should have been brought sooner.
That there was even a reason to refer it to special counsel. That wasn't proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Merrick Garland needed. He needed just the lower standard to refer it to a special counsel. He waited over 2 years. Fani Willis, okay, she obviously waited. She was worried that people would ask for a speedy trial. So she dotted her I's and crossed her T's and dotted them again and crossed her T's. Who is going to inquire into how did she delay this case? So all of a sudden, you have her case against Trump. You have the case in Washington, D.C. against Trump after 2 years of getting a special counsel. And everyone says Trump is the one person who deserves it. Mr. Katz, this is not a teaching moment as to all the hypothetical bad things that could happen. This is not a list of all the things that happen to regular criminal defendants in this country, which is unfair. This is Trump, and it's also Giuliani. And for God's sake, they need to be held to account. And if they did all of these illegal things, and it turns out that they get charged for 4 of them at the same time, and it happens to be 14 months before the presidential election, well, so be it. But boy, Mark, this shoe could be on the other foot. And you just have to ask yourself, is this the way we're really going to have it in this country? That everybody who's a presidential candidate gets charged in an opposing district, and not even by the federal prosecutors, but by state prosecutors. And if you look at this effort now to remove this case to federal court, okay, everyone has opined at the fact that the state court, we can get into this more if you want to, that the state court isn't even bound by that rule, that the feds, so remember the feds are not supposed to charge a sitting president. And I think by extension, you can argue that they shouldn't charge a sitting president like Biden. Where's that rule? That's a rule that the Department of Justice is not supposed to charge a sitting federal president. There's no rule that I know of that a state cannot charge a sitting president. So that's a real thing that Biden gets charged in Texas somewhere, okay? And it happens just at the worst time for him, just the worst time to launch his campaign. And then the argument's going to be, hey, the shoe's on the other foot. All these people say that there's no bar on a state prosecuting. Now, there's something called the Younger Doctrine, Mark, which says that the federal government should abstain in a state criminal prosecution unless you can prove bad faith. Try to prove bad faith, right? They're going to try to prove it on Fani Willis, and I bet they fail. I bet she hasn't done anything when it all shakes out that's in bad faith. Or when it's a total constitutional stretch. Maybe if Biden had never set foot in that county in Texas, and he never called into that county in Texas, and no one had any contact with that state prosecutorial district in Texas, maybe yes, then Biden could get the federal government not to abstain. But I just don't think this is a good precedent. I want to say one last thing. Aaron Burr, when he went and had the duel with Alexander Hamilton, and Hamilton ended up dying a couple of days after the duel, Aaron Burr was prosecuted in state court in New Jersey, and I think he ended up being prosecuted in state court in New York. But it was a different era. You know what he did as vice president after that? He just didn't set foot in New Jersey or in New York. Not something that Biden could do in Texas between now and November 2024, right? So
That's a great fact.
Those are my troglodyte views that I bet your commenters are going crazy now.
No, it's interesting, and it's really it's a good argument you've made, and frankly, it builds on some of the layered arguments you've made in the past. I mean, I mentioned and sort of underscored, as you said it, the fact that you feel that these charges were slow walked, but the fact that this is overcharged, and you've made the case quite effectively, I think, for essentially other prosecutions could come and they'll come the other way. You're also right that you'll see in the comments people are jihadists when it comes to what they feel is a situation with a guy who was attempted a coup on the United States government, a sitting president attempting a coup, and his co-conspirators. And they, I think, and I'm kind of expressing a frustration that I note, feel as though, guys, we have seen no real repercussions on this guy in all of this time. Now, you, David Katz, have made the point that these other charges, the Jack Smith type situation, that cake should have been baked way before it was. But the frustration is, and then I'll just wrap up, I'm just kind of expressing it as you have sort of alluded to, is, hey, whatever you got to do, let's get this guy already and his band of merry men.
Well, my comment on that would be it was egregious. It was awful. The whole world saw it, including Merrick Garland and his army of attorneys and investigators saw it, which makes it, to my mind, even more necessary to be explained by Merrick Garland and the people there why it took 2 years. And I think, one answer is that they hoped it would go away. That's not a very good answer that they want to give, I think, publicly or under oath. And if the other answer is that, well, it took Congress's tremendous January 6th committee, it took Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff and all the heroes and heroines of that committee hearing, they had less resources than Merrick Garland, DOJ, and the FBI. So that also doesn't look good. That why did Merrick Garland, the U.S. attorneys, the Department of Justice, and the FBI get to the bottom of it? It took a much smaller staff with the January 6th committee to get to the bottom of it. And if his answer is, well, we needed Hutchinson, we needed Casey Hutchinson, we did? Wait a second. The grabbing the wheel, that kind of stuff, it was very dramatic. Mark Meadows talking about it. But how did that really add such a quantum of evidence about Trump that for 2 years he couldn't appoint a special counsel? And there is an aspect of piling on this thing. There's 4 of them all going on at once. And you hear the arguments, and it's because Trump has done, in my opinion, so many vile things, so many things that are worthy of opprobrium and worthy of punishment and accountability. Boy, do I get it. But it is not a good precedent to have 4 things all piled on at once. And you hear the argument, well, this will really tie up his time running for president. That plays right into his base and his argument, doesn't it? That this is election interference. 4 of them all launched at once, one in Washington, D.C., both of them by someone who, no matter what you say, works for a Democratic attorney general who was appointed and kept in office by a Democratic president, and now by the district attorney in Atlanta and the district attorney in New York City. And all 4 of them are coming at once. And all these judges are telling them what to do at the same time. And boy, I'm telling you, if the shoe were on the other foot, and that's, of course, what the Republicans want to do. They want to try and put it on the other foot and look at it through that perspective, which, again, I don't look at it because I do see Trump as being egregious and well worthy of prosecution for January 6th and the insurrection and the marauding itself within months, Mark, of January 2021.
Wow. I see why you're such a good defense attorney now. Man, you are strong. I mean, and you argue facts, and opprobrium is a ding word. I want to ask you about the flipping, because I'm seeing a lot of that in the chat as well. The flipping is associated with this week, the fact that a Mar-a-Lago employee finally pushed away from Trump counsel, got his own counsel, and his own counsel said, hey, it seems, or this is implied, time to tell the truth here, not some story that they told you to tell. And he essentially went back on everything that he had said, which was associated with the fact that Trump and those around Trump, his fellow indictees, if that's a word, actually asked him, they were involved in trying to erase those various recordings from security. Could you speak to the flipping?
Well, I think that, Michael Cohen just said that Trump's an idiot, and that only an idiot would not pay their lawyer, their doctor, and their mechanic, because you'll go down the hill without brakes. But, Trump is a special kind of idiot. And he tries to figure out, I think, who he really should pay and who he can get away with not paying. I think that's his mentality. I think he was very foolish with Michael Cohen. I think if he'd have given Michael Cohen the right job and the right respect, Michael Cohen never would have. He treated him with such disrespect and contempt personally and didn't give him a job in the White House. Think about that. Would the FBI really have raided Michael Cohen's office had it been in the White House?
Oh, that's a great point. Great point. Yeah.
So, he makes his own problems, Trump, a lot of times, and then he tries to worm out. He's all about the moment. How is he going to get through the crisis of the day is my view of Trump. So Trump will always pay for the handyman and for the valet. It's not that much of a bill. They can devastate him. They can turn around and say, he told me exactly to do that. He told me to go hide the national security documents in a room and tell the lawyer that they were all in the room that the lawyer was in, and not tell the lawyer that they'd been put by me in a whole different room that we weren't going to let that lawyer Corcoran in so that he would file that phony certification. And it was all in black and white. So Trump is so worried that those folks would say something like that. He's going to try to keep them close. And to the extent that one of them got their own lawyer, that person obviously calculated that they weren't going to go to jail if they cooperated, and they would rather get this thing behind them. You know, to be under criminal indictment, Mark, and I've seen people like this for years and years now that I've been a federal criminal defense attorney. You know, a lot of them have to take, even though I tell them, look, have confidence in me, I'm going to get you through this, I've got experience. But can you imagine? I mean, a lot of them are taking anti-anxiety medication. That's the best case. I mean, the thought of suddenly your life being uprooted, being away from your family, being in prison and stuff like that. So this fellow, I think he decided, look, I like my chances with the Department of Justice saying I shouldn't go to prison and giving me a break, whatever deal they gave him. I like my chances better doing that than having Trump win and pardon me a year. You know, I got to bet on Trump winning. I got to bet on him being loyal and giving me a break, deciding that he needs to give me a pardon. You know, I think Trump right now says to himself, I should have pardoned everybody for January 6th. That's what I should have done. But at the time, he obviously didn't like that look. And so people like Giuliani are saying, man, you left me hanging out there. You could have given me a pardon on January 19th. You gave it to a bunch of gangsters and racketeers. You gave it to all kinds of utterly low-life people. I think one or two of them has gotten themselves right back doing another Ponzi scheme or extorting somebody else. You gave all of these mad pardons, Trump, and you didn't give me one. But on the Georgia case, I think his calculation is, I don't want to give those other defendants of mine really good lawyers who are really expensive and do a lot of work, because I think Trump's strategy is to just delay that case. He wants everybody else to delay it, Mark. I think he's not happy with this attorney Cheeseborough, who wants to save his own reputation and get work for himself as an attorney. I think he went to Harvard Law School. I think he has, like, he thinks, a distinguished legal career ahead of him. He wants that to start now and have a speedy trial. I don't think Trump wants to pay for someone like Cheeseborough to get a great lawyer to do a lot of work to give him a speedy trial now. What is in it for Trump to have anybody in Georgia ask for a speedy trial now? So I think that's one reason. And I think Jenna Ellis, he says, look, what does Jenna Ellis have on me? Probably nothing. She's an ambitious young woman who wanted to get ahead. She never could have gotten a job like that. She took her chances. She took her chances. This was going to lead to great fame and renown, and it's led to a state indictment, and she doesn't have anything on me, and I don't want her to have a speedy trial and a lot of money, so I'm not paying.
Kim has these are the mugshots of the various people?
Well, I have the latest one that I wanted to show you because Mark Meadows surrendered today, and here is his that just came in. He was booked at the Fulton County Jail. Took about an hour. He was released on $100,000 bond, which he negotiated right before his surrender. But I also wanted to tell you that we have new details about when Trump is headed in. He posted on social media that his arrest time will be 7:30 p.m. And in the same post, and I throw this out there for you guys to comment on, especially, I want to know if you think this is a dangerous, if this comment is dangerous. He posted, arrest time 7:30 p.m. and then he talked about the number of views on his interview with former Fox News host Tucker Carlson racking up on X. He said 231 million views and still counting. The biggest video on social media ever, more than double the Super Bowl. But please excuse me, I have to start getting ready to head down to Atlanta, Georgia, where murder and other violent crimes have reached levels never seen before, to get arrested by a radical left, low-life district attorney, Fani Willis, for a perfect phone call and having the audacity to challenge a rigged and stolen election. The evidence is irrefutable. Arrest time, 7:30 p.m.
Well, that's not my narrative of what this case in Georgia is all about. I see why it's his narrative, and I think that, people bandy about the First Amendment. I don't think that he's violating any court's order by saying that. I'm sure he's had good lawyers look at it with that idea in mind. Is he violating any of the court orders? He's not. I think the only thing that he can't do is to comment on discovery that was under a protective order. Unless someone can prove that he took discovery that he got under a protective order, and he's bandied it about. He's put it on social media or something. This is America. I mean, if he doesn't have the right to say, my prosecutor is a lowlife, my prosecutor is just trying to get me, this is vindictive. You can file a motion in court saying all of those things, that it's vindictive prosecution. Now, most defendants don't want to do it. They figure, you know what? No matter what the prosecutor and the agents are doing to me right now, if I infuriate them and I taunt them, they'll come up with some way to treat me even worse. But that's not Trump's calculation. And Trump has every right in the world to defend himself in the press and to lambaste the prosecutors who are prosecuting him. I think he's going to be very careful about the judges. But the prosecutors, you know, you have to have a thick skin. You know, I prosecuted one of the first cases of a racketeer. I mean, a huge scam case where the guy turned out to have AIDS. And at that time, AIDS was a really unusual thing. And, you know, I was a heartless person who wanted to see him, you know, die in prison. And I was just prosecuting him. And he had a right to say those things. I mean, you know, you have to be careful not to cross the line, but you have the right to say things about your prosecutor. So, and the other thing that I do want to say about this, you know, they say that they're going to treat these people just the same as everyone else. They throw that around. But that is a bad look. You know, what they're going to do at the jail with these people, and it's a hellhole. It's a jail that he can say the Democrats who are in power haven't done anything to make that jail any better. Someone can document that he died of being bitten by bed bugs in this hellhole of a jail. And he can say the Democrats haven't done anything about it. They've been in power for all this time. Why don't they do something about the jail? Why don't they do something about crime in Atlanta? You know, that's the argument, right? That they're spending all their, of course, they can do both at the same time, but they haven't done anything about that jail. And now the optics of making all of those defendants go down to that jail. What are they going to do at the jail? They're going to run their rap sheet. Well, they can ran their rap sheet days ago. They don't need them at the jail to run their rap sheet. They're going to have them roll a fingerprint. You can roll a fingerprint in a little device that's about that big, and you take their photo like that. They really need them to go to that hellhole of a jail and have that look of the jail behind them. They need to have that on Trump and Meadows. Why are they doing that? And, you know, Meadows is trying to get his case sent over to federal court, and we can talk about that if we want.
Well, you had mentioned before that he may be the one guy who could legitimately do it, meaning that there's
I
legitimate
think he
argument.
has a good shot, Mark. And I think even if he loses it in front of the district judge that he's in front of, he's going to take it up to a much more conservative court of appeals down there than is the district judge that he's in front of. And then I think he could take it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Because the idea is that, and let me just, can I take a minute on this?
Yeah, please go ahead. This is, again, just to remind everybody what we're talking about, just to reset, we're talking about Meadows trying to change the venue to federal court. Go ahead, sir, please.
Right. So the U.S. Supreme Court case, we talked about this last week, is a marshal who has no really deputization to do that, but he's traveling with a U.S. Supreme Court justice over 100 years ago. Somebody attacks or is thought to have attacked the U.S. Supreme Court justice, and this marshal kills him. And he's prosecuted in the state courts of California. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, no, no. That was within the course and scope of his duties. The argument is, wait a second, there was no deputization. No one even said that you as a marshal. But the U.S. Supreme Court said, look, it's the common sense of it. Someone needed to defend this U.S. Supreme Court justice. You were defending him. This attack occurred. Now, once the case is moved to federal court, that doesn't mean that you're exonerated, right? If it was a wrongful, it was too much attack. It wasn't self-defense. It was just someone screaming and yelling at the Supreme Court justice, and this marshal shot him, right? He would be convicted in federal court, right? Just like he would have been convicted in state court, but the state prosecution occurs in federal court. It also wouldn't be pardonable, Mark. So if this state prosecution, let's say of Trump and Meadows, happened in state court, in federal court, it would still be a state conviction rendered in federal court on account of the removal. It would not be a federal crime. It couldn't be pardoned. Trump could not pardon himself for it, and he couldn't pardon Meadows for it. I think it has a good chance of being there. Now, what they're going to say is that this was part of the political campaign, but I haven't seen the evidence, maybe you have, that Meadows went there as part of the political campaign. Meadows says he went there as chief of staff. He was chief of staff at the time. He was getting a paycheck from the federal government at the time. If they can prove that he went there under the political arm, but why would he be so stupid? He's a smart guy. He had lawyers. Why would he go there? Just in case this whole thing blew up and he found himself where he is now. Wouldn't he have styled the trip as being by chief of staff as part of his duties as chief of staff. He says to report back to Trump and actually to tell Trump they're doing a great job. Everyone's doing it according to Hoyle down in Georgia. That's his story right now to get himself into federal court. So I think he has a good chance of getting into federal court. I think so does Attorney Jeffrey Clark, who is a Department of Justice official, and scary enough to say Trump has a decent chance. But I think those other two are going to get themselves into federal court.
2 points. One is thank you for that information about state and federal. I don't think I've heard it anywhere that would be the state case that's tried at the federal level and it's not pardonable. That was really great information. Number two, I want to ask you about this, but it is the case that in a federal court venue, the jury will be different, and that may be the key to an acquittal.
Well, here's the funny thing. It would be drawn from an area which is also pro-Biden. Apparently, Atlanta voted about 75, 80% for Biden. But the surrounding area, that would be the federal jury pool, voted about 65 or 70% for Biden. And so I don't think that's going to make that much of a difference. I think that Fani Willis and her prosecutors would be a little bit on the wrong foot being in federal court. They'd still prosecute the case. I'm sure they do a great job. But obviously, she and her staff are more familiar being in the state court with the state court rules. And there's a whole interesting thing. You know, I want to say two things, if I might. We studied this question in federal courts at Berkeley when I was a law student there. And the students who were going to clerk for federal judges took this great course called Federal Courts. And this younger doctrine was on the exam back then. The class was taught by Professor Fletcher, who's now on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And it's like, oh my God, here's the younger doctrine coming back from the early 80s law school exam. And it's exactly on this, on abstaining in this type of a case. And I think that if it were a prosecution like we can imagine in a hypothetical of some, let's say President Biden right now, President Biden gets charged like we just talked about in Texas. They would certainly try to show that it was bad faith. They would show that it was such a constitutional stretch that a federal judge should enjoin it, should stop that from happening. But if they didn't, it would be just like the Fani Willis case. It would be going against a high federal official, Trump's former high federal official. But if it doesn't matter whether you're in office or formerly in office, then both of those cases could be going. I don't think that that's going to happen. I don't think anybody has the chutzpah, the cojones, even in Texas, even in Idaho, to go charge President Biden for anything, even if they could prove that he made one of those social phone calls, just talking about the weather phone calls with Hunter and one of Hunter's prospects. Also, I think the statute of limitations has probably run by now. That's one of the arguments about the congressional investigation. Why did the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Central District of California and in Washington, D.C., and the agents and Weiss, why did they let the statute of limitations run? But I think it's run on Hunter and the president in an effective sense. They really couldn't go after the president. And I think it's good. I think it's good that they not go after the president in state court. I'm not advocating that. I'm just troubled about state court prosecution of a president, a former president, or particularly a presidential candidate. And whether we like it or not, it looks like Trump's going to be the nominee. I didn't think any of those guys did so great last night. What'd you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's no standout. I think it's going to be, look, he's just so far ahead. He'll have to misstep in some way. And I think he's good at this. He's good at campaigning. He's good at saying the right thing. And
they just don't like Pence, Mark. They just don't like Pence. He doesn't have.
Well, I mean, Pence is just, there's no there
Pence
there.
Can't run on I'm Trump without the baggage. I'm Trump who got you those 3 U.S. Supreme Court justices that you like so much.
And that's what he wants to run on.
We came so close. We came so close, and I saved our democracy. That might be a winning argument with some swing voters, but like my wife says, really, I wouldn't vote for. I know Pence saved our democracy. I wouldn't vote for this guy with a gun to my head.
No, of course. I mean, that's right. That's certainly not a referendum on the rest of his positions. Cojones and what was the chutzpah? Thank you. Yeah, both ding words. David, love you. We're late. Appreciate you being here and always being here on Thursdays. Thank you, my friend.
With a CH, Mark.
CH
one last thing. I'm going to be on CNN Newsroom tonight after Trump is down there at the jail. So watch CNN.
David, promise us you're on in London. You're on CNN. I've seen you on Fox News. Please don't be like all my other boyfriends and leave me when you get popular, all right? Come on now.
Not at all, Mark. Not
All
at all,
right.
Mark. I love
Thank
being
you,
on your
David.
show, and I love having Kim on too.
Yeah, she's great too. Thanks, David Katz. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.